What's up, y'all? It's Bud Elliott here, part of the Cover 3 podcast. This is our lunchtime hangout, and excited to talk about a couple topics today, and then we will go ahead and take your questions. Producer Jordan behind the scenes will be selecting some questions that we will take a look at, and I'm excited to get to that. But first, I want to get to some questions that we've had for a while, and there's a couple here that we need to get to. Make sure I'm checking my notes here. I'm going to let everybody get into the chat as well real quickly. So, got a couple listeners popping in. Maybe we'll get a couple more here. Again, keep getting your questions loaded in. We'll make sure we get to the best ones. And everybody having a good day today? Anybody bet the Monday night game last night? We will. We'll see. All right. Well, yeah, we can go ahead and start this one now. And the first one that I'm going to talk about today is about not betting college football teasers. I've had a lot of people ask about this because they've heard me say it on the show that betting college football teasers is a losing proposition, right? Why is it a losing proposition? Why do sportsbooks offer it when we know that certain teasers are actually a winning proposition? Well, here's the deal. Most teasers are going to be a long-term loser for you, even in greater margin than regular, straight betting will be. They are offered because they're oftentimes a bit of a sucker bet. You are getting points on both your wagers, but you have to have them together as a parlay, often for a payout that is not that great. I mean, most places 6 points, 2-team teaser minus $1.10. In certain situations in the NFL, it can work. On NFL games with low totals, where you're going through key numbers 7 and 3 completely, as well as sort of your secondary key numbers, 4, 6, etc. If you use a 6-point teaser in the NFL on a game with a low total, and you take a team from a 7.5-point favorite down to a 1.5-point favorite, that is what is known as a Wong teaser. Stanford Wong, in one of his famous books, wrote about this, and it still holds true today. The numbers have shifted a little bit due to the kicks being moved back and some stuff, but it still works. In college, however, the variance is much too great. You have a lot more potential outcomes and far less certainty of scoring, right? For instance, NFL totals usually are somewhere between 36 and the low 50s. College, we have many totals out there that are in the 60s, 70s, and occasionally we'll even get a point total in the 80s. And so you might think, okay, well, what if you just use these teasers in these certain situations where the college total is still low? However, the data that I've been able to see on this still says that this is a losing wager because of the certainty being far less and the variance being greater in the college game. You have a lot greater range of scores. A whole lot of games do not land within a point of the spread. And that's not even discussing teasing a total, which you should never do in college or pro, at least according to my numbers. So anyway, teasing college games is a losing proposition. If you like a team, just bet that team. There's a decent chance you'll win. There's a decent chance you'll lose too, but you are throwing away your money in greater amount, and you'll lose it faster if you are going and betting college teasers. Even on the low total college teasers, even if you're going through 3 and 7 completely, it's just a bad idea because of the math. It just doesn't work out. You're not buying enough certainty with that teaser like you're doing on the NFL side in those certain situations. And I see people that hit me in the DMs all the time. Hey, what if I tease this total from? No, don't tease it. Do not tease totals, and just don't tease college football. It's a losing thing. Maybe it's a public service announcement. Obviously, a lot of us do this for fun, even if you're a person who actually makes good money on it. Look, if you're doing it for fun, you'll lose less. You'll have more money to use throughout the year. Do not bet teasers in college football. All right, let's go ahead. Oh, what is my general opinion of parlays? I love them. If you have an edge, right? If you have an edge, then you should definitely play the parlay as well. If you think you have an edge across multiple games, especially on the money line side. If you have any shops that allow you to parlay some alternate lines, I think that's certainly something that can be worth a look. Parlays are not inherently bad if you have an edge. They are different from teasers because in teasers we know that like the house knows what it should charge you to get those extra points. The same thing kind of goes for buying points as well. Unless you find a shop that is really off market as far as the price that it charges you to buy points, you really should avoid doing so in college football. I know it feels good at the time, right? To go and buy that point. Okay, I'm going to buy them to 7. But if they're charging you 20, 25 cents for that, it just is not worth it. It's not the right call. So parlays, money line parlays, I definitely take some. If I feel like I have an edge, it's a way to hit pretty nice. I hit a pretty big one back in 2014, but ultimately, I would stick with straight betting for the most part. Parlays, if you feel like you have an edge, go ahead. Be aware that you'll probably lose just because of the nature of parlays. And teasers, don't do them in the college game. All right, next thing I want to tackle here is certain coaches having potentially missed their windows. So let's go ahead and talk about this. Have certain coaches missed their windows to get a promotion? I was thinking about this the other day as I watched some guys lose some games, and they're guys either at G5 schools or at P5 schools who are good coaches, I think, who have had some success and ultimately maybe have missed their window to get a promotion. And in some cases, that's fine. Some of these guys have big deals, and they may not be looking for a promotion. But if you go back and think, there's been some guys throughout history who have had really nice starts to their careers at a spot. And you think, okay, that guy is destined to get another job. And then for whatever reason, that fire hose of talent or winning or chemistry, it just shuts off. And it's very difficult to get it back. Let's go ahead and think about one here. Mark Hudspeth, right? Who was at Louisiana Lafayette for a long time, was doing a great job, and then it just fell off. And forever, everybody was like, that guy is going to get a job. And then he just didn't end up getting it because his team didn't stay as good. It's really hard to sustain at that G5 level over and over again, unless you're at one of those schools where you just have tremendous ability to get talent over everybody else, right? Boise, due to its California pipeline, UCF, probably Cincy, schools like that. So let's go ahead and down, and I have my list here. And we're just going to discuss whether they have missed their window or not. I'm not going to say all of these guys have, because I don't really believe that. I think some of these guys probably still have plenty of upward mobility if they get it going. But how about Ken Niumatalolo at Navy? We saw him mull over the BYU job a couple years ago. I think he's a really damn good coach, but Navy has just not been as good so far this year, although they hung a little bit tougher with Houston than Vegas expected, and we were on that one, so I was happy to see that. Last year was a very difficult year for Navy. They had that terrible start with the non-contact COVID practices, and there are so many challenges for a triple option type coach anyway to get a job. I still think that if for some reason BYU needed to hire a coach, that he would be in contention there. But the bloom is off the rose there a little bit, and that's one to kind of think about it. What about Dino Babers? Now, this is kind of obvious, but if you go back to, was it 2017 or 2018? Dino Babers won, I think, 9 or 10 games at Syracuse. He was running the Art Briles offense, but was not connected to the Art Briles scandal, which back then was a huge deal. If you weren't connected to that and you ran that wide open offense that he had also had success with at, I believe, Bowling Green, he was a hot name. And for whatever reason, I think offensive line development has been a major problem there. Babers has not been able to recapture that magic. Now they are, what are they, 3-1 this year? I believe they lost to Rutgers. Shout out Lance Glenn, our number one Rutgers fan at 24/7 Sports. But I mean, I think if he had followed up that one 9-win season with another one, he would be in position to jump. And now it doesn't look like it's likely to happen. Mike Gundy, somebody who was connected to producer Jordan's Tennessee team several times. Like, Oklahoma State is actually off to a really nice start this year, but the way they're winning is not typical Oklahoma State. They have won so far with defense, the offense, in part due to injuries, but also in part due to some quarterback issues, has not looked very good. and we'll have to see. I'm a little bit skeptical that Gundy could still go out there and get like a major SEC job at this point, or a major Big Ten job. Oklahoma State's a good job, and he makes a lot of money there. And I think for the most part, the fans like him. Sometimes he's had some kind of back and forth with the administration, but Mike Gundy is one whose star certainly used to be higher. So we'll see on that. A name that many of you in the comment section have brought up, it was certainly on my list, PJ Fleck. Man, PJ Fleck is a guy that I thought maybe could get the Oregon job. A guy who I thought, hey, he hung tough with Ohio State. Maybe if they look good going forward, they did beat the heck out of Colorado. Maybe he'd get a mention for the USC job. Although some people think his shtick is kind of fake, and some people really buy in. But the hire of Mike Sanford on offense, I think, is one that has really hurt his career as far as ability to move up. Not a good hire, in my opinion. Offensive efficiency has really dropped off since they lost Kirk Ciarrocca. They lost some important receivers there too. But man, certainly not somebody I think could go out and get a major job, a major step up for Minnesota right now, given that they just lost as a 31-point favorite to Bowling Green, which is the biggest upset of the year, including these FCS upsets too. I mean, I'm an FSU fan, graduate, and they were a 26, 27-point favorite, I think, against Jacksonville State. Bowling Green was an even bigger underdog and went on the road to beat Minnesota. So one that we're going to have to monitor there. I think Fleck is young enough to where if he does get it turned around with the Gophers, it's possible that things could still go his way as far as getting a better job. But certainly that loss hurts his chances quite a bit. Jeff Brom at Purdue, again, a guy who had very hot as a G5 coach, gets a P5 job. It's on the lower end of P5 jobs. And luckily for him, Purdue locked him up to a big-time contract. So he is making big-time money, but he is not on an upward trajectory. They did beat Illinois barely over the weekend, thanks in part to some really bad punting decisions by Bet Bielema. And, that'll be one to monitor there. But I don't see him getting another big-time job anytime soon unless he does something really special with Purdue. An interesting question would be if Scott Satterfield was to leave Louisville, would Brom still get a look at Louisville? It's possible. Seth Luttrell, one from North Texas here, is one that I'm interested in. He was really doing well, and ultimately it's just fallen off. Another good example, if you're a G5 coach, you can bet on yourself. You can turn down job offers. It's possible, right? We are seeing Luke Fickell of Cincinnati do it. I think we're still seeing Billy Napier do it. But, man, the odds of you maintaining that success are not great. And Luttrell was a really hot name, an offense that scores a whole lot of points. And since then, their defense has just been an absolute disaster over the last couple of years. And he's not going to be getting any bigger jobs anytime soon. I think Hugh Freeze is an interesting one on this list as well, the Liberty coach. I think we all kind of know why he didn't get bigger jobs recently. Was going to have to go kind of do the rehab camp there at Liberty. But so far this year, Liberty doesn't look very good. They're not scoring a lot of points. Syracuse pretty much shut their offense down. They beat Troy, but did it kind of with defense. And if they're not scoring a whole lot of points, I don't think Freeze is nearly as an attractive coach as he once was. David Shaw is another one on my list here. He's a guy we discussed on the Cover 3 podcast a lot. If you recall, the coach who was the most adamant as far as opposing the early signing period, it was David Shaw. And the reason was because of when Stanford actually offers admission to guys, a lot of times kids already want to have their decision made up before this new early signing period, before Stanford is even able to really firmly offer them admission. I don't think any program has been hurt more by the early signing period than David Shaw. And then finally, as far as the head coaches, I think Kyle Whittingham is an interesting one. Just cannot seem to get the offense right there at Utah, and the defense this year has been okay, but not necessarily great, right? That's one. He was always mentioned for jobs. He would get bandied about on some of these hot boards or hot lists when they were rumored to be firing Clay Helton there at USC. But recent success hasn't totally been there. we will see if Utah gets it turned around more in conference play, but certainly somebody whose stock is a little bit down as far as making that jump, if he even wants to make that jump. Jason Candle, by the way, was another good name. My friend Chris Hummer brought it up today in the 24/7 Sports Slack chat. Toledo guy, maybe will bounce back, but just that's a tough one. It is very hard to sustain long-term in the MAC because typically it's, do you have a special quarterback? Do you somehow get an NFL guy or two where the defense just can't cover him? You go score a bunch of points, you win, but can you actually sustain it? That's difficult. On the coordinator side, I know a couple of y'all asked about this. Tony Elliott is a name who his stock is certainly down based on this year and this team. But I will say I think Tony Elliott's a very good recruiter. I think he's a smart football coach, and he's a pretty proven football coach. Clemson's going through some stuff right now. I think they'll be back. I don't think Clemson's going to have some huge sustained, multi-season drop-off. And I actually don't think Tony Elliott's stock is that down. I think Tony Elliott is picky for a reason and can afford to be so. So anyway, that's the list that I have right there. Got a couple more questions on the coaching side. Does Art Briles ever get the Rick Pitino luck in getting back to coaching? No, I don't think so. No, the magnitude of the scandal that Briles that happened under his watch there is one that is much bigger than what Petrino had going on, and yeah, it's just totally different circumstances. Not that I think Petrino deserves all these million second chances. You can debate that, but I don't think any administration is going to touch Briles, at least not at the FBS level. Maybe the FCS or D2 or something like that. Got a couple more here popping up. People asking about Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman, the Notre Dame defensive coordinator. No, I don't think that I just don't think it's realistic for Freeman to even be on these lists as far as moving up quite yet, because he's only been at Notre Dame for 1 year. And it is different playing in a power conference or a power conference schedule than what Freeman did as a coordinator at the G5 level, right? The G5 level is, I think you just don't go from being a G5 coordinator to a head coach. G5 head coach to P5 head coach happens all the time, works out quite a bit. G5 coordinator to a P5 type coach, not really gonna happen. If Freeman wanted to leave Notre Dame and go get a G5 head job, I think he could pretty easily do that. Okay, what about Kendall Briles? Yeah, I mean Kendall Briles is an interesting one, right? Like, the guy can clearly score points. Can he run a program? The connection to what happened at Baylor is less proven and less direct than it is for Art. He's obviously his son, so administrations, I'm sure they would do their due diligence and figure out that one. We'll see. Like, I could see him maybe getting a G5 head coaching job if he wanted. I don't know that he would get a P5 head coaching job anytime soon, but we'll see. It's a much different task to actually run a program than it is just to run an offense. Skylar Everton wants to know, do you ever see Chris Petersen getting another job as the head coach? I don't, actually. And it's not that he couldn't do it if he wanted to. I just think I think that he's pretty content not coaching. I think he got out of coaching for a reason. The stuff that I had heard was he really didn't like the way recruiting was going and how you had to play the recruiting game, and just wanted to be around his family more. So, yeah, that kind of makes sense for me. I had one from Twitter today that I do want to take. I appreciate everybody dropping these in the chat, but this Twitter one was interesting. Let me see here. It was interesting because it was about West Virginia, and the commenter basically wanted to know. He said, "This is from Tariq Badur. Not sure where to post a question. The YouTube chat would be great, but if you want to do it on Twitter, you can do that too sometimes. But should West Virginia be looking at a guy like Jeff Traylor or Hugh Freeze? I like Neal Brown. His defense is very good, but his offense/play calling and in-game management is suspect. Can West Virginia ever get back to national relevance? Is Neal Brown the right guy? And he follows with, this is my reaction from West Virginia giving the game to Oklahoma. Would like to hear that the industry's consensus on Neal Brown. He is doing a good job in recruiting, so I think he needs a few more years, but the offense, in-game management, and beating teams like Oklahoma when you have the chance to win. So I think it is completely unrealistic to think that Neal Brown is doing anything but a good job. It's West Virginia. West Virginia has traded the chance to have national success for a check. I know Coca probably hates that take. I got a couple guys on Twitter who hate that take every time I say it. It's the truth. Maryland and Rutgers did the same damn thing. Maryland and Rutgers will never be nationally relevant now that they're in the Big Ten, right? They just won't. But they got that check, and they kept their athletic departments going. West Virginia needed a life raft to get out of the Big East, or AAC. And guess what? That's what happened. They got that check from the Big 12, and, I mean, granted, you can debate how well that's worked out for them now that the Big 12 is losing its two cash cows. But, I mean, at this point, like, Neal Brown is doing his best. Like, I think has West Virginia kind of close to its ceiling. I mean, they could maybe a win or two better, maybe as he goes forward. But where they are, they're not going to get the type of players that you need to be a playoff team or to be a national title contender. That's just not. That's not going to be it. It's not going to happen. Maybe they can win the Big 12, the new Big 12, once in a while. But guys, like, you can say his offense is better or should be better, but I mean, come on. I think that question is crazy. And look, we love crazy fans because crazy fans pay our bills. They're the folks who watch us every single day and want to talk college football on a random Tuesday in the off season, or just have fun with these hypotheticals. And that's why we have so many viewers live with us right now. But realistically, man, I think Neal Brown's doing a hell of a job. And I don't think West Virginia has much ceiling as a program. I mean, he can. What do you really think West Virginia can do in the Big 12? 8 wins, 9 wins? If you really dumb down the non-conference a whole lot, could you win 10 game once? Sure. Yeah, so Jack Fudala, Fudala, I believe. Maybe I'm pronouncing that correct. I agree with him. I think they're pretty lucky to have Neal Brown, and I think he's doing a hell of a job there. Just playing with Oklahoma is an accomplishment if you're the Mountaineers. Sorry, Coca, if you watch this. All right, so let's go ahead and take a couple more of these. We had a question about, here we go. Is the Oklahoma defensive coordinator still a hot commodity? I think his name is Grinch. I think so. Alex Grinch has done an improved job with that Oklahoma defense pretty much each successive season that he's been there. I think he's shown that he can defend offenses in a high-flying league. It's looked better and better each season. They've recruited well under his watch on the defensive side of the ball. I don't see why he wouldn't be a hot commodity, right? He's got a number of years under a big-time program. It would make sense. Of course, anytime I hire a defensive head coach, I am concerned because we know a lot of these defensive guys, they take and they play suboptimal decision-wise. We talked about this on yesterday's show on the Cover 3 podcast about how Mel Tucker has done a really nice job for Michigan State as a defensive coach who is actually allowing his offense to succeed and not gambling with all these punts. You never know, right? But that's just what that is. All right, let's take Manny's question here. Zach Evans versus Bijan Robinson on Saturday. Who was the better talent coming out of high school? So were they the same year? I'm trying to think. Physically, I think Zach Evans was a better player. Now, Bijan Robinson was probably a more sure thing, I think, just because of some of the flakiness questions that Zach Evans had going into it. And you do have to take that into account when you're looking at prospects, right? There's floor and there's ceiling. I think Robinson had a much higher floor than Evans did, but I do think Evans probably had and still has a higher ceiling. So fun question there from Manny. That's going to be a hell of a matchup this Saturday. We will see who gets the best of that. Do you think North Dakota State will ever move up like Georgia Southern did and Appalachian State did? Or are they too comfortable in the FCS? That's a really good question. I actually don't know. I would ask my friend Matt Brown over there at Extra Points. I think he does a really good job with a lot of the FCS and smaller conference stuff. If you guys want to give him a follow, certainly somebody who I think is worth it. North Dakota State just says they do such a nice job, but like ask Georgia Southern how it is to move up. That fan base loved winning games in the FCS, and now they're firing coaches because they're not going to have the same level of success in the in the G5 at the FBS level. It's just a different game, and I don't know why do they need to make that move. Is there a conference partner out there who really wants to snatch them up? What is their cut of TV revenue going to look like? What does that do for them? Are their fans going to be happy losing those traditional rivalries? I mean, ask Maryland. Do you think Maryland likes being in the Big Ten? I mean, their administration probably does because they get that check, but their fans probably don't like that. They don't have any natural rivals in the Big Ten. They probably miss playing Duke, North Carolina, and NC State and all those schools in basketball every year. They probably miss playing Syracuse on the regular. So anyway, it's not always the best option to move up. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Which one, Jordan, which one do you want to take now? What do you think Joe Brady's outlook is for the future? Is he going to stay in the NFL, or can an LSU or USC lure him to be a coach? I really don't know. I think USC is going to go for a proven head coach, somebody who understands how to run a program. I don't think that USC's issue, for the most part, is scheme, right? I think you need organization there. But I don't know, man. That's an interesting question. With LSU, they just tried to recapture that magic with Orgeron going out and hire those coordinators now. So potentially there, I guess I could see that. But ultimately, I don't know. That's a really good question. He's doing a nice job at Carolina, certainly. Do Tennessee fans acknowledge that they messed up by running Greg Schiano out of town? Ooh. Jordan, what do you think? Our producer Jordan is a Tennessee fan, so this is a good question to ask him. You're muted.
I think it would have been pretty hard for Greg Schiano to do well at Tennessee, honestly. There are a lot of built-in disadvantages to having to play that schedule every year. I don't know if he's quite the proven recruiter in the South. Maybe would have won a few more games than Pruitt.
Yeah, I think he probably wouldn't have made some of the same mistakes that Pruitt made.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, we should take a look here at what Schiano is doing at Rutgers right now, and then also discuss Tennessee. So, you guys know my opinion on the Tennessee hire. Not super high on Heupel as a long-term answer for Tennessee. I think Tennessee made that move because Heupel was affordable. He was somebody who would say yes to the job at the time. Remember that at the time, and potentially still, Tennessee was very much thought they might have some serious sanctions coming down because they turned themselves in for cheating in order to fire Jeremy Pruitt without a buyout. And the NCAA has been pretty bad as far as investigating people recently. But if you do turn yourself in and lay it all out on a silver platter, the NCAA right now still usually takes that opportunity to hammer you, right? Ask USC how cooperating went. There's a couple other schools who are good examples of that as well. And so we'll have to see what that is. Now, did Tennessee make a good hire there with Josh Heupel? I think you can argue that they actually did for their current needs. If you need somebody to score some points, right, and to sell some tickets, I think that's actually something they can do. Heupel's offense is going to play very fast. They're going to score a lot of points in games. I mean, they lost to Pitt, but they scored 34. They beat Bowling Green 38-6. That win looks a little bit better, for now that Bowling Green beat Minnesota. Obviously, like they moved the ball some on Florida. They just had some turnovers and some stops, and they really weren't going to be a team that can beat Florida. I'm pretty skeptical that Heupel's the long-term answer there at Tennessee. I wasn't super impressed with what he did at UCF, especially on the recruiting side. But I do think he'll sell some tickets and score some points. And if you're potentially going to be in a situation where you get sanctions dropped on you, and again, that's not a guarantee, but I mean, would you bet against it? I wouldn't at this point, given that they actually turned themselves in to the NCAA and self-reported it. That part is kind of hard for the NCAA to ignore. If you're going to go through some hard times with either the lure of potential sanctions hanging over your head or actual sanctions, have it somebody who could score some points and actually sell some tickets and put not a competitive, but an interesting product on the field is not the worst thing. So I think that makes some sense. And then we'll see if he doesn't work out, if Danny White gets to make a second hire there for the Vols. But I do think Danny White's a pretty good AD. And I was surprised that they took Heupel, but after looking into it, I think that's kind of why that happened. If Franklin took the USC job, would Penn State take Jeff Hafley? Ooh. So that's one of those moves where I think I would bet on the guy to succeed. I really do think Jeff Hafley is a pretty good coach. I think, like, I look at the offer stream that we have on the back end of 24/7 Sports, and Boston College on the P5 side is one of the early evaluating teams, in my opinion, that they do a nice job of scouting out guys before they get their stars and offering them. They're willing to take chances on dudes who later, become committed to like an Alabama or a Georgia or whomever, right? And I think he's done a pretty solid job. However, we'll see if he's proven enough. Boston College, depending on what kind of record you think they finish with. Right now, I think they probably finish like 8-4 as the most likely record, but they're 4-0. So are they going to finish 4-4 down the stretch? If so, that's kind of tough. Like, they're probably favored in most of their remaining games. I would say the Wake Forest game, the roadie at Georgia Tech, and in the roadie at Louisville, maybe the toughest. But in what game are they going to be a slam dunk favorite in? Like, they're not going to be favored by more than, like, they will not be a double-digit favorite in any of these following games unless some team just totally falls apart. At Clemson, NC State, at Louisville, at Syracuse, Va Tech, at Georgia Tech, FSU, Wake Forest. I don't know. That's not a slam dunk win in that group, really. All right, here's one. I want to take this one from John Vickers. John asks, why is the NFL easier to bet than college? It's not. There's no way. It is not even close to easier to bet than college. Now, the pro groups do have a decent focus on the NFL. We're talking about the groups that move millions of bucks because the NFL will take the highest limits, right? There are places in the offshore world, Antigua or Costa Rica based, who will take $100,000 per side in an NFL game. And they'll let you rebet it every 60 seconds. Now, most of us will never need to do that. I certainly do not need to get down $100,000 on an NFL game. But at a certain point, if you're a pro bettor, the problem is not finding out who to bet. It's finding where to bet and when to bet, like timing the market correctly and knowing exactly when certain limits go up. So that's one there that NFL is definitely not easier. The NFL has a lot more money in its market. There are far fewer games. There are better models out there for the NFL. I think the quality of, so you have team-based models and player-based models, if that makes sense. I guarantee you that the player-based models in the NFL are much sharper than the ones in college because of the availability for, two reasons. Number one, the availability of injury information in college is not as good as it is in the NFL. In the NFL, we kind of know who's playing in most games, right? Number two, we don't really know what some of these players are in college because their sample sets are so much smaller as far as the duration of their career. So that's tough. The NFL is much harder to bet than college. I don't screw with the NFL. right? I bet some Stanford Wong teasers, but that to me is just formulaic. I don't even care what the team names are there, right? That's just kind of a thing. All right. What's recruiting state is not talked about much, but it's a quiet hotbed for talent. Louisiana's pretty good, but I guess that's usually talked about. I think Arizona is increasing as a state for talent. But I mean, guys, we do the rankings. So if we find that a state is a hotbed for talent, we want to put the stars on those guys, and we want to talk about it. I don't know. I think that's pretty standard there. Let me. This is one I want to give a shout out to my friend Bill Connolly here, because I was actually G-chatting with him about it this morning. Let's talk about Jimbo's offense real fast. Okay, so I'm going to read this off if I can. Where's my sheet? Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So would this Jimbo offense look different with Haynes King's mobility? Calzada has been bad thus far, which also begs the question, how does Jimbo in year 4 not have a capable backup? Well, I think it is harder for the I think it is harder for teams to keep good backups nowadays in the transfer portal era, right? Because if you really think you can play, a lot of times you'll transfer out to somewhere that you can play. My big thing with Jimbo's offense, right? And I think it's a beautiful offense. I think Jimbo is a brilliant schematic guy. Is that, and I'm serious about that. Like he's one of the smartest coaches I've ever just talked to one-on-one. The guy is super sharp, like probably like savant type sharp. Is that he is not keeping pace with the rest of college football when it comes to explosive passing. Now, he runs a West Coast-ish offense. It is very much find the open guy and hit him. It is not an offense that schemes guys wide open, and it is not an offense that has kept pace with the other offenses that take advantage of the rules of college football, right? If everybody had to play on a level playing field and we didn't have all this RPO stuff with the man downfield and all this like super spread stuff and stuff that like the NFL still looks at as gimmicky, there are spread concepts now in the NFL, but some of the college stuff, the NFL definitely still looks at as gimmicky. Then I think Jimbo would have a much better advantage over the rest of the sport. But the rules are the rules. And if you are not taking advantage of those rules, the only team you're hurting is yourself. I don't think Haynes King's mobility would be a huge difference maker. I think that would be a better option than Calzada right now, but obviously he's hurt. However, I'm going to read to you the passing explosiveness ratings. These are Bill Connolly's, dating back to 2010 when Jimbo took over at Florida State. Right? I don't have the data from when he was at LSU. So, but I think we can agree that 12 years, including this year, is enough data, hopefully. All right, passing explosiveness. 2010, 88th nationally. And these are opponent adjusted, and they have garbage time taken out. So this is only when the game matters. 2011, 42nd. 2012, 69th. 2013, they had the number 1 overall pick. Every single player on offense was drafted, and they had the Heisman winner and won the national title. 27th in passing explosiveness. Okay. 2014, 98th. 2015, 86th. 2016, 96th. 2017 is last year at FSU, 71st. Gets to A&M. A&M have been chucking the ball around and having an explosive passing offense for quite a while under Kevin Sumlin. 97th. Next year, 2019, 118th. 2020, 99th. This year so far, 95th. This offense does not create explosive pass plays. Period. I mean, you're talking about, 85th or worst. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the last 12 seasons. 85th or worst. So that's bottom third in the country. More than half the time. I mean, if he just modernized it a little bit and could create some wide open guys, I know that sounds easy to do, and it's not. But there are coaches out there who are very good at creating coverage scheme bust, and they create the easy wide open throws, right? They use the rules of the college game. They use the hash marks. They use some of the downfield RPO tricks, and they don't make it quite so hard on the receivers and the quarterback to where you have to have, the number one overall pick and legitimately guys who played in the NFL at all other 10 starting positions to have an explosive passing offense. And the problem is that offense is becoming less explosive relative to the rest of college football pretty much every year because the rest of the sport is catching on to some of these ideas, and this offense so far has not. Now, I will give Jimbo a little bit of credit on this. In the spring game, they were using some more tempo, right? They have been one of the slowest teams in college football for the last 12 years. Early in this year, Haynes King and that offense was also using more tempo. Now, of course, he gets hurt. They go back to taking 30 seconds to find the correct play pretty much every time. But again, 88, 98, 86, 96, 97, 118, 99, 92. Guys, that's 8 of the last 12 years, bottom 85 in passing explosiveness, We'll see. All right. Isaac Atkins wants to know, is this the guy who said Clemson was a top 15 team? I'm not, but I actually agree with Chip there, right? Based on how they've played so far, look, they have 2 losses. So if you rank your teams just based on losses, okay, you do you. How many teams do you really think could hang within a touchdown of Georgia? A defensive touchdown, by the way, which I consider defensive scores to be pretty much luck, based on how I evaluate teams. If you have different data, show it to me. But ultimately, like, how many teams could go neck and neck with Georgia? Do you think there are 15 teams out there that can do that? Now, you could also say how many teams would play Georgia Tech within a score, and I think you're right about that. You could say how many teams would go to overtime to NC State, and I think you're probably right about that. But that performance against Georgia, based on what Georgia's done to everybody else, is an extremely impressive performance. It's probably one of the best performances of the entire year. Georgia's defense so far is that good. And Georgia's offense has wrecked everybody else that's played. They didn't do that to Clemson, though. We'll see as more data points come in. If Clemson's offense doesn't improve, if the defense slips, then no, I won't have them that high. But so far, I evaluate quality of play, not final scoreboard. That's how I do it. You guys may do it differently. So yeah, I actually support Chip there in that assessment. Okay, Jordan, I got called out for talking about Iowa. Love the Cover 3 podcast, but I have to call you out on something. You talk about Iowa's lackluster offense, which is warranted in their great defense, but you leave out special teams. Okay. Well, a couple things. Number one, special teams are not a third of the game. That's not true. I know you hear that a lot. That's the third of the game. It's not, right? It's an important part of the game, but it's definitely not like a third. It gets much lower rating, or as far as input. Iowa does have very good special teams. They're extremely good in kickoffs, right? They have had nice kickoff returns this year. I think their punter is actually fairly good. But ultimately, special teams help you win on the margins. They're not usually a huge deciding factor. What is deciding games for Iowa is this. They are legitimately top 10 in everything. Defensive efficiency, defensive success rate, forcing 3 and outs, limiting explosive plays, both in terms of magnitude, the size of the explosive play and the frequency of explosive plays given up. They're extremely good in the defensive red zone as well. This is a damn good Iowa defense. That defensive line has wrecked people so far. They have an extremely high rate of interceptions relative to passes defense, which we know is a little bit lucky, but also there is some skill in that. As we've discussed, Iowa routinely outperforms in that category. So they're both good and a little bit lucky on defense. Now, let's talk about Iowa on the other side. Okay. Iowa, 121st in success rate, 125th in offensive efficiency, 112th in going 3 and out, 115th in explosive play rate. This is a terrible offense. And luckily their schedule rest of the way is easy, right? They don't play Michigan. They do get Penn State. They don't get Ohio State. There's a pretty good chance that Iowa wins at least 9 games, maybe 10, and hell, it's not crazy to think they could win 11 games and go 11-1. I think 12-0 is pretty unlikely. but it's possible. I mean, if you gave me like 1,000 to 1 odds that Iowa runs the table, in the regular season, I would take it. So it's not like one of those infinity type thing. But this offense is just terrible, guys. And it's not a, hey, they haven't had to go very far type thing. We're talking about efficiency numbers. So I'm stripping the starting field position out of this and just looking at what they do with the ball when they get it. It's crap. Okay? Terrible. They're so bad in like every single category. It's a bad offense. We'll see if it can improve. And Spencer Petras, 5.6 yards per attempt adjusted. That's hot garbage. They don't throw the ball down the field. Percentage of passes with more than 20 yards in the air, 123rd in the nation. So like they don't throw the ball downfield. They don't effectively use their play action off their run game. That's like the one part of this offense I actually do like. I think Tyler Goodson's a pretty damn good back. But this passing offense just doesn't get it done at all. So anyway, Iowa's a good punter. They play their game. Their game is a game that you can win a decent number of games with. It is not a formula that you can win everything with, because somebody will get a couple points on their defense, and their offense just won't be able to do anything with it. Maryland is catching 3.5 or 4 at home against Iowa on Friday night. Which way you're leaning on this one? I have no play on this one right now. Iowa D versus Talia will be interesting. Yeah, so this is the first game, right? I want to be sure I'm good on this. Let me pull up my notes to be accurate here. I think this is the first game where Maryland has faced like a really good defense. I think West Virginia's defense is good, but not like Iowa's defense so far, in my opinion, has been better. The Mountaineers probably have like a top 25 type defense, maybe slightly better. Iowa's defense so far, in my opinion, is probably the second or third best defense in the country to Georgia. They shut everything down. They tackled extremely well. They're very disciplined. I am a little skeptical that Maryland is going to be able to score on Iowa here. But I really don't want anything to do with Iowa's offense having to get me points on the road, because it's Iowa's offense. And I just read all those numbers off. Like, the thing with Iowa's offense, it's not like they do well against bad teams, right? They're bad against all teams because they're just not competent right now. If I had to play something in this, I would probably consider playing like a Maryland team total under. I may still fire that in right now. Let me pull up that number to see what we have here. Team totals typically don't come out yet because that's a weeknight game. We will see a couple outlets that have team totals. I'm not seeing any team totals right now for Maryland and Iowa. Maybe Pinnacle has it. Let's see. As always, if you guys do, if you are shopping for odds, the best spot to go is Odds Jam, in my opinion. Promo code BUDE21 get you a nice discount on that. That's how I find all these odds, and you can program it to have the books that are available in your state or country or international or however you play. I would take a look at the under 21.5 team total for Maryland. If a 10 shows in the first half, I would also take a look at that. I'm just not. I don't know. I'm impressed with what Maryland's offense is doing against most teams it'll face. I do think Iowa's defense is a little bit of a different beast. I think it's that good, but I just don't really trust Iowa's offense. And I could also get screwed on the Maryland team total under if I play it by Iowa's offense having turnovers, right? Like, Iowa's offense is not going to continue to avoid turnovers at this rate. It's just not. They're going to have some turnovers with how sloppy they are. Although there's a good amount of luck in turnovers, so who knows? They could stick with that. All right, we'll go about probably 3-4 more minutes here. I really appreciate everybody jumping in. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully I haven't angered too many folks here. If you guys like this show, hit that subscribe button down at the bottom. Really important. You get notifications whenever we go live. Sometimes we go live for emergency options, and that's a good chance to hit those. All right. What program that the public generally sees as a powerhouse do you think is the next to fall off? Alabama posts Saban, Clemson now, Oklahoma if Riley leaves. Oh, man. Shoot. Well, based on how well they replaced Bear Bryant, I would kind of say Alabama, but then again, I wouldn't, right? Because I think the leadership has changed. When they were trying to replace Bear Bryant, Bama kept making the mistake of, hey, let's go get somebody who's connected to Bear Bryant. When what they should have done is, hey, we have tremendous resources here, and we'll give the coach all the money and facilities and things that he needs to succeed. Let's just go get a proven coach. And it took them a while to actually do that. And so they went through a ton of former Bear Bryant assistants, or like anybody who had ever met Bear Bryant, got a head coaching job at Alabama for a while, and they kind of wandered in the desert, for more than a decade there. So anyway, I don't know. I really don't see a fall off coming right now for one of these teams. I mean, I don't think Ryan Day is going anywhere at Ohio State. I think he'll make a defensive coordinator, like a good hire this offseason. And honestly, I think if he had not had a COVID year last year, maybe he would have made one and made the Kerry Coombs change after 2020. But it's just really hard to make a coaching change, based on 2020. So, yeah, that's something for me to think there. Let's go ahead and take. We had a couple questions about Oregon. I usually don't like to answer multiple questions from one person, but I appreciate you guys asking good ones. What do you think will stop Oregon from winning a title? Well, I don't know that anything necessarily will stop them from winning a title. I think they could win a title. Are they good enough this year to win a title? I don't know. Their run game is pretty good. I think their defense, when healthy, is very good. A couple things, though. Number one, the secondary is kind of leaky. They allow way too many first downs through the air. They do a decent job of preventing explosive plays, but they are a little bit leaky in the secondary. So that somebody could get them that throws the ball all over the place. USC maybe could get them. Who knows? I don't think Washington State's going to do it. I don't really trust them right now. Somebody else in the Pac-12 who throws the ball well maybe could get them. The other thing is that they are not explosive through the air. They have a decent amount of passing success, but they don't really hit the big plays through the air all that much, which is interesting because they're for the most part throwing a lot of these short RPOs and swings. I don't know if they really trust Anthony Brown all that much. His numbers this year, touchdown to pick ratio is good, 7-0, but his completion percentage is poor, 57%. That's not really what we're looking for. More downfield passing. I think that's probably a combination of receiver and quarterback there. Offensive line, I think, has been better. But, yeah, it's probably the ability to hit home runs in the passing game is what could keep them from winning a title. But they're going in the right direction. Cristobal's a hell of a recruiter, So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and duck out here. Got a couple emails I got to get to and trying to work on some stuff for our podcast network. Really appreciate producer Jordan working on this. If you guys want to, follow me on Twitter at Bud Elliott 3. We are back tomorrow. The Wednesday show is not live, but we will be on YouTube and in your podcast feed. And, of course, the Locks Pod on Thursday at 11. No show Friday. Saturday late night, we have the Saturday recap show. And then, of course, Sunday, sometime between like 3 and 4:15, I'll put it out on my Twitter, is when we do the live show for the gambling. And that's just kind of generally when I feel good about going live for it. And again, we're getting some decent number moves in our favor if you're one of the folks who follows the Bud's bets. Although not quite as good as last week. So hoping for some more movement there. Really appreciate everybody joining me, and I'll see you all next time.